Hi everyone, I'm Barb Duffrin, the Superintendent of Mahtomedi Public Schools.
And I'm Bill Manazzi, Director of Business Services.
And we are going to give you an overview of our operating levy request that's on the November 6th ballot. This is the same presentation that we've given at all of our community meetings, and we are going to start off by showing you a video that really will give you an overview of what we'll go into detail with in a minute.
Mahtomedi is my home. I have been blessed, and I am thankful to be able to be a part of such a great district.
Wonderful job. We're doing wonderful things for our kids, and then they go off and emote those positive things wherever they're going.
We have athletes, we have artists, we have scholars, we have leaders. They all come together and rally around this idea of being a Zephyr.
Our parents are our foundation for our school success. Our teachers are committed. They're passionate. They're innovative. We are so fortunate to have a community that loves and supports its schools.
Unfortunately, the state over the last 15 years has not met its obligation with funding school districts. This is causing many school districts, Mahtomedi included, to make reductions in their general fund year after year. And for that reason, on November 6th, we will be asking our district taxpayers to vote on a tiered increase to our operating levy in order for the district to maintain and enhance operations and financial stability over the long term.
If the levy passes, our priority is to reduce class sizes district-wide and enhance academic programming. We also want to prioritize safe and secure buildings and build financial stability through deficit reduction.
We as a district have really gone out of our way to take the time and the effort to put those students first and to give them the tools that they need. The district has worked hard to keep the class sizes down so that the teachers can develop relationships.
Kids are challenged to think outside that box, and teachers are there to support them along the way.
Mahtomedi is so much more than just a number on a test. We offer so many activities. Over 93% of our high school students participate in an activity or a club. We have something for every student.
When 83% of our general fund is spent on student-based expenditures, that means that our district continues to do a great job of focusing on needs for kids in the classroom.
If the levy does fail, we'll need to increase class sizes, reduce program offerings, and as a result, reduce staff.
We need a strong school district in order to have strong cities.
Any realtor selling a piece of property, the first thing that they talk about is it's located in Mahtomedi schools. Property owners benefit from having strong schools.
On an average priced home, if the operating levy is approved, the taxpayer impact would be $159 in the first year, or approximately $13 per month.
I am absolutely proud of this district. You couldn't have a better place for your kids to go to school. Once you're a Zephyr, you're always a Zephyr.
So there are 5 key questions that we will be covering regarding the levy. Why are we asking for the levy? What are we asking? What happens if the levy passes? What happens if it fails? And how and when do you vote?
Okay, starting first with why are we asking for the levy? As you can see on the chart here, the state of Minnesota has not met its obligation to fund Minnesota school districts, and this lack of funding has impacted the budget decisions in our school district. Those of you who may remember last winter into spring, our district had both a challenging budget process and a challenging dollar amount whereby we made $1.6 million in budget adjustments, $1.1 million in expenditure reductions and staffing and enrollment adjustments for 2018-19. The result of which has left us with less resources in our buildings this year in 2018 compared to last year in 2017-18. And I'd like to point out that this is a problem affecting certainly the Mahtomedi School District, as we're talking about today, but this is not exclusive to the Mahtomedi School District. This lack of funding at the state level has impacted school districts all across the state. Conversations are going on to this effect in many districts that we've talked to. And so looking at a visual representation of that structural deficit that exists between state aid and inflation, on the chart you can see the general education state aid funding formula, which as determined by the state legislature down at the Capitol, is the primary revenue source for Minnesota school districts. You'll see on the next slide that state aid, as appropriated by the state legislature, accounts for 73% of the revenue we receive in the general fund. If you look at this chart, in 2003 on the lower left-hand side of the chart, if we index the consumer price index, which is the red line, when compared to the green line, which is actual nominal increases in the state aid funding formula, in 2003, if we index those the same at $4,966 per adjusted pupil unit, and then fast forward 16 years from 2003 to 2019, increases in inflation have gone from $4,966 up to $6,930 per student, whereas actual increases in state aid have increased only to $6,312 per student, which creates a structural deficit of $618 per student. So said another way, if the state of Minnesota and the state legislature had simply kept pace with inflation in their state aid funding over the last 16 years, we would be receiving $618 more per student. Not only has the state not kept pace with increases in inflation, they have certainly not kept pace with increases in educational expenditures over the last 16-year period. And certainly if they had done that, this conversation would be much, much different as it relates to going back to the taxpayers on an operating levy. So this is what I referenced on the previous slide. Where does our revenue come from? So it's important for our community to understand where the general fund revenue sources for our school district. So you can see in the blue shaded area, 73% of our revenue budget in the general fund comes to us from the state as appropriated by the legislature. We receive 21% from the local property taxpayers here in the Mahtomedi School District, a whopping 2% from the federal government, and then 4% other local, things like activity fees, gate receipts, donations, and investment earnings. And so the bulk of our presentation today is obviously talking about the local property taxpayer impact related to the ballot question next month. But the conversation really does start talking about state aid because that is such a big piece of our general fund revenue budget. So looking at the Mahtomedi School District individually and how we compare to other districts statewide and then also in the 7-county metro area when it comes to revenue and expenditures. So you can see in the middle column there, the average district in the 7-county metro area receives about $12,538 per adjusted pupil unit in the general fund revenue. In Mahtomedi, we receive $11,278 per student. So over $1,200 less per student than the average district in the 7-county metro area. And community members are somewhat surprised to hear about this, that our school district spends and receives over $1,200 less than the average district in the 7-county metro area. And I think it's quite a remarkable statistic considering our district is consistently a top 10 high school in the state of Minnesota and consistently highly ranked with regard to MCA scores and achievement data. And frankly is providing an excellent educational experience for all of our students, whether those students are taking gifted and talented courses in an AP programming or they're taking basic skills programming. Our district strives to provide an excellent educational experience. Even given this financial statistic, I think that is quite remarkable. And people want to know when we show this slide, why? Why are we receiving so much less per student than the average district in the 7-county metro? And the answer is really twofold. The first is related to socioeconomic need. So a portion of your categorical aid from the state is tied to socioeconomic need, otherwise known as free and reduced count. So Mahtomedi School District has a relatively low free and reduced count and relatively low socioeconomic need, and we receive a relatively low categorical aid related to things like basic skills programming, Title I and Title II from the federal government. And the second reason is related to our referendum authority per student and how that compares to both our contiguous and comparable districts in the metro area. And that's something that we'll look at from a comparison standpoint later on in the presentation. So shifting from the revenue side of the ledger to the expenditure side of the ledger, where does the money go in our district? How are we spending our current allocations? So in District 832, approximately 83% of our general fund expenditures are spent on student-based needs. So you can see in the pie chart on the right-hand side, 83.5% of our general fund budget is spent on student-based needs, things like elementary and secondary regular instruction, student support services, counseling and guidance, curriculum development, and district transportation. And so a common theme last winter into spring when we were going through those budget reductions is we understand, the community would say, and many people would say, we understand that you need to make budget adjustments, just make sure that your budget reductions, expenditure reductions don't affect kids in classrooms. Well, 16.5%, as you can see on this chart, of our expenditure budget is outside of kids in classrooms, and so it's becoming increasingly difficult for a district to balance the budget without affecting student-based needs. So, and you can see the other areas, buildings and sites account for about 8.7% of our budget, district level administration and support at 7.5%, and then fiscal and other fixed costs at 0.3% for things like workers' compensation and property insurance. And one other comment I'd like to make before we move on to the next slide. This is going to be a common pie chart for all districts in the state of Minnesota. School districts are people-intensive organizations, and you're just not going to see any districts with 40 or even 50% student-based expenditures. The majority of our expenditures are on wages and benefits, and that really drives that student-based expenditure category. Now, shifting from the why to the what are we asking? What are you going to see on the November 6th ballot? So you may have heard a little bit about this tiered approach, and so let's try to unpack that in exactly what does that mean. So instead of asking taxpayers for a large amount all at once, the conservative tiered approach breaks the levy into 3 smaller amounts for the taxpayer over the course of the 10 years. So this is an operating referendum, and it is a 10-year operating referendum. So if it is approved, it will be in place from 2018 through 2028. And the 3 smaller tax impacts are a period of 3 years, a period of 3 years, and then finally a period of 4 years. So the 3 years plus the 3 years plus the 4 years to get to the 10-year operating levy. And the tax impacts would take place in 2019, 2022, and finally in 2025. And we're asking for the increase incrementally over time to correspond to incremental changes in school district budget costs, including teacher salaries, healthcare, and operations. And then looking at how does the tiered levy impact our taxpayers, the average referendum market value of a residential home in our school district, which again is Mahtomedi, Grant, Delwood, Pine Springs, Willarney, all are parts of the 9 communities that our school district serves. The average home value in our taxing district is approximately $350,000. On an average referendum market value residential home, the total tax impact over the 10 years will be $477 if the levy is approved. However, that $477 is not what we are seeking to increase taxes by next month in November. You can see on the bottom there, in the tiered levy, the impact is broken down into 3 smaller amounts. So $159, approximately $13 a month in 2019, and then taxes will stay relatively the same in 2020 and 2021 before increasing by another $159 in 2022, and then finally another $159 in 2025. So it is not tripling taxes. What we're doing here is conservatively splitting the $477 tax impact down into 3 smaller tax impact changes. And it is important to note at the bottom of the chart there that we do have a tax impact calculator on our webpage. So obviously in the Mahtomedi School District, we have an average residential home value of $350,000. We have plots of land at $35,000. We also have homes at $3.5 million. So obviously a wide range of tax impacts related to the operating levy. And if you're interested in, on a more personal level, what the tax impact or the estimated tax impact will be for your home, you can click on that link on our webpage, and it'll take you out to our webpage where you can plug in your estimated market value to see the tax impact. And this is just a visual representation of the change in taxes if the levy is approved in November. So you can see on the left-hand side the average referendum market value is $350,000. Our current voter-approved levy from the 2014 referendum, taxpayers that have an average priced home are currently paying $429 a year related to that voter-approved operating levy. If the levy is approved in November, that amount will increase from $429 up to $588, which is that $159 tax impact that I talked about on the previous slide, and it will stay that way for 2019, 20, and 21 before increasing to $747 in 2022, and then leveling off at $905 in taxes payable to 2025. So a $159 tax impact 3 times over the 10-year levy is what what you'll see on the November ballot. Shifting now into competitive local partnerships. So as I mentioned earlier, how does our referendum authority compare to other districts? So you can see on the slide, our current referendum authority per student is at 1,044 per adjusted pupil unit. So in our contiguous and comparable districts that we have on this slide, we are second to the bottom only to the Forest Lake district, which is also on the ballot next month in November as well. Looking at White Bear and Stillwater, White Bear Lake is at 1,538 per student, Stillwater at 1,515, so we're about $500 per student, less than both of those districts. And then over on the far side, you can see Orono is at 1,967, a district that we compare to from an achievement standpoint and from a demographic standpoint and size. And then the state cap, so Orono's at the state cap, which is also 1,967. So important to note that our current referendum authority is over $900 less than the current state cap from a referendum authority standpoint. Now we show this slide for 2 reasons. It is important for our district to understand what a referendum authority per student is. It's also important for us as a community to understand our community makeup as it relates to our referendum authority per student. And here's what I mean by that. So the Mahtomedi School District is heavily residential in nature, and we lack significant commercial property. And why that's important to illustrate, let's look at South Washington County, for example. So South Washington County is at $1,837 per adjusted pupil unit. But if you think about South Washington County, which is Woodbury, Eastridge, and Park Cottage Grove High School, and you look, for example, in Woodbury up and down the 94 corridor, they have every type of commercial property that you would ever want. And so the reason why that's important to this slide is that the increase in commercial property that they would have in South Washington County versus a residential district like Mahtomedi means that the tax impact is borne by a larger base. So in Mahtomedi, where we're heavily residential, the tax impact is absorbed by our taxpayers at a larger percentage than it would be in a district that has higher commercial property. And the reason why that's important is it wouldn't be it would not be a good idea for our district to go to, let's say, the state cap, for example, because the tax impact, if it was approved, would be astronomical. And that's why the board, when they approved the referendum resolution back in May, decided for this tiered approach and to be fairly conservative with regard to the tax impact related to our lack of commercial property in our school district. Shifting now to the ballot language. So this is the exact ballot as you will see it in November. And so what we have on here, obviously the fear with this tiered approach is that the ballot is fairly cumbersome. There are a lot of words on this ballot, but if you read through it, I don't believe it to be overly cumbersome. So what you see here is our current voter approved authorization of $743.74 per pupil. That amount was approved in 2014, and we are seeking to revoke that $744 per pupil and replace it with $1,020 in taxes payable 2019 through 21, which is the first tier of the operating levy, $1,295 per pupil in taxes 22 through 24, and then $1,570 per pupil in taxes payable 25 through 28. So just seeking to revoke the $744 and replace it with the amounts in the years specified. And so it's important to note that the increase on the ballot is not the taxpayer impact. Some people get that confused. The increase from $744 up to $1,020, for example, is the increase per adjusted pupil unit in district revenue. So that is different than the taxpayer impact. So the taxpayer impact on an average priced home of $159 would generate approximately $275 per adjusted pupil unit. And the one other thing that I'll point out on this slide is that if the levy is approved, the $1,570 per pupil in the third tier, if you remember back to the competitive local partnership slide, will actually be lower than the state approved cap as it sits today. So the state approved cap is $1,967 per adjusted pupil unit, and if the levy is approved, our third tier amount 10 years from now will be less than the cap as it sits today. And I'm certainly confident that that state approved cap will continue to increase over the next 10 years, and I think more over the next 10 years than the last 10 years, reflecting that structural deficit at the state level that we looked at earlier. Ooh, wrong way.
So these next few slides, we're going to talk about what happens if the levy passes. And our priorities were set, as we call them, our guiding principles by the board. And that would be to reduce class sizes district-wide, enhance academic programming, strengthen the safety and security of our buildings, and build financial stability through deficit reduction. So if the levy passes, how will class sizes be addressed at Mahtomedi High School? One of the things that we did as an administrative team is we said, okay, what if the levy had passed this year? What if we had the money from the levy this year? How would we have prioritized spending that money to reduce class sizes? The reason we did it that way is that next year students at the high school will register for, we don't know what they'll register for in terms of classes, and so to say specifically what the class sizes would be next year is difficult. But this year we could say, okay, how would we have made different decisions this year? So for example, what we would do is we'd start with where are the programs that have the highest class sizes, and we're going to address those first. So for example, at Mahtomedi High School this year, we would have added additional sections of math, English, social studies, and health, and then also offered additional electives, including career and technical education and advanced engineering. Our math, English, social studies, and health classes are high. They're pushing 40. They're in the high 30s. We were able to keep them below 40, but they are high this year. And we had a number of students register for classes in the career and technical education field and also in advanced engineering, but we just weren't able to run those classes because they weren't quite at a level that we could afford to run. So our core academic classes then, if we had been able to do that this year, our core academic classes would lower from those that were approaching 40 into, they would be down in the low 30s. And again, although enrollment and student elective choices vary every year, the same methodology would be used to lower class sizes at the high school if the levy passes. At the middle school, we would lower our average class size again and address the grades and programs with the highest class sizes first. So for example, using the same method this year with Mahtomedi Middle School, we would have added additional sections of core academic classes for both 6th and 7th grade. This would have lowered the average 6th grade core class size from 31 to 28 and the average 7th grade class size from 30 to 27. And again, enrollment varies a bit from year to year, but we'd use the same method. The same method would be used to lower class sizes at the middle school if the levy passes. Now at the elementary, we were able to keep our class sizes at the metro average this year. So in the spring of 2018, we saw that the average homeroom class sizes were projected to be at 28 in 2nd grade and 30 in 5th grade. And the board made the decision to not fill the Wildwood Elementary principal position for just 1 year so that we could preserve classroom teaching staff and bring our class sizes down at the elementary level. So as a result, our 2018 average class sizes are 24 at 2nd grade and 27 in 5th grade, and those are about the metro average. So if the levy passes, we'll both hire a Wildwood principal and also maintain those class sizes at the elementary so that they are at or below the metro average. When we talk about enhancing academic programming, if the levy is approved, we intend to enhance academic programming in the areas of gifted and talented programming at O.H. Anderson Elementary School. We also would be able to offer those additional courses that I mentioned earlier at Mahtomedi High School, in particular those areas of career and technical education and advanced engineering, because those are areas that students and families have identified. One other thing that I'll mention at the middle level, we weren't able to do this year. At the middle level, we organize our grade levels into teams of teachers, and those teams of teachers have the same group of students. And the intention there is to make it feel kind of like a smaller environment, a school within a school, and really be able to offer those wraparound services for students. So this past year, this current school year, we aren't able to offer that teaming approach in 6th and 7th grade. So that would be another area that we would consider that we would restore, and I would consider that under the heading of enhancing academic programming as well.
Shifting now to the third guiding principle from the school board guiding principles related to the operating levy, and that is school safety and security. So you'll see on the chart, which is a bit of a good news item, the Department of Education and the 2018 legislative session announced $25 million statewide for school safety and security improvements. And of that $25 million, $12.5 to be spent outstate Minnesota, $12.5 in the metro, up to $500,000 per site, and that was on a grant basis that we could submit for grant. And so our school district certainly did submit for that grant, and we were lucky enough to receive one of the grants for the school safety and security improvements at O.H. Anderson Elementary School. So I'll back up and say of the $25 million, there were over $255 million worth of grants submitted for districts all over the state, which certainly underscores the need for safety and security improvements, not only in Mahtomedi, but across the state as well. You can see that we applied for a total of $173,000 in school safety projects, and we were awarded $41,000 at O.H. Anderson Elementary to do things like indoor, interior to exterior door alarm improvements and some buzzed entry security improvements in that building. So that is certainly a great news item and revenue that we will have access to that we otherwise would not. Certainly outside of O.H. Anderson, we do have safety and security initiatives that we need to look at. And we referenced, for example, the middle school. So our Mahtomedi Middle School was built in the early 90s, and school buildings that were built in that era generally had the main office set back from the secured entrance, and that is certainly the case at the middle school as well. So we do have a buzzed entry at the middle school, but once visitors gain entry to the main part of the building, they're able to gain access to the stairwell without necessarily checking in at the main office. So looking at how we can improve that secured entrance at the middle school as well as our other buildings would be one of the school safety and security priorities related to the operating levy. And then finally, the fourth guiding principle is related to deficit reduction. So deficit reduction in this context is really referring to our school district fund balance, which is similar to a savings account on a personal level. So you can see our school district school board has fund balance policy number 714 in place that says we will strive to maintain a minimum of 8% in an unassigned fund balance in the bank at any given time. And we will be below that as of June 30, as of the end of the 17-18 school year on June 30, 2018. So we need to implement a long-term plan to remain financially solvent and have an adequate balance in reserves for unforeseen financial situations, things like state aid shutdowns or state aid holdbacks that we all have seen in the not-so-distant past. So that is certainly one of the guiding principles related to the levy as well.
So what happens if the levy fails? It really is just, if the levy fails, we'll have to increase class sizes, reduce program offerings, and reduce staff. What we're going to do now is go through a few of our frequently asked questions that we also have answered on our webpage as well, but we thought it might be worthwhile to go through these right now with you, some of our most frequently asked questions. So the first one.
Sure. A question that we get quite often is, will the operating levy question that you're going to see on the November ballot be used for things like stadium, turf, a new O.H. Anderson building, a hockey rink? No. The operating levy is used for operating costs and the four guiding principles as set by the school board, which, as we just said, include class size reduction, enhancements to academic programming, safety and security projects, and deficit reduction. And I do want to say, you may, if you pay attention to the school district budgeting process, you may have seen turf replacement at our stadium field scheduled for a few years down the road. So we are budgeted to replace that stadium field turf. However, the expenditure, the revenue for the replacement of that turf will not come from the operating levy. That will come from a source of revenue called long-term facilities maintenance, which is a categorical funding that we receive an aid levy mix for things like roof repairs, window replacement, replacement of stadium turf, And so that is the categorical funding that we will use for that project, not the operating levy on the November ballot. So we've also been asked about the property tax calculator. So as I mentioned earlier in the slide, we have the average priced home in our taxing district is $350,000. We have plots of land for $35,000 and also homes for $3.5 million. So obviously a wide range of tax impacts related to the upcoming levy. And the tax impact calculator really does give our first tier impact, so calendar 2019 impact, but we, just by way of transparency, want to make sure that we revisit the idea of a tiered approach and that the tax impact changes will happen 3 times over 10 years. So in 2019, 2022, and 2025. So as I mentioned previously, on an average priced home, the tax impact will be $159 in 2019, 22, and 25. 159 times 3 is $477 over the 10-year period. And just to mention a couple of questions that we've been asked, so the average referendum market value in our taxing district of $350,000, that's the current average price. And people have asked if it's a little bit short-sighted to not take into account potential increases in home prices over the 10-year period. And certainly we do understand that the average priced home of $350,000 as it sits today will certainly be more in 2022, the second tier, and even more in 2025, the third tier. However, the tax impact is based off of the percentage home, or the average priced home as a percentage of the total market value in our taxing district. So the most apples to apples comparison that we can give is to assume that that same $350,000 as it relates to the total referendum market value in our taxing district in 2019 will be the same percentage in 2022 and the same percentage in 2025. Obviously, if the overall referendum market value percentage goes up by 5%, related to some Adelaide Landing, for example, that's a new development coming in Hugo with 25 homes in the first phase in the Mahtomedi School District. If that causes the average, the total referendum market value to increase by 5% and the average price home increases by 2%, then obviously the tax impact would go down. And conversely, if your home goes up by 5% and the total goes up by 2%, your tax impact would change slightly. But the most apples to apples comparison is just to assume that it's going to be the same percentage over the 10-year period.
We've gotten quite a few questions about open enrollment. So just to clarify, what is open enrollment? Open enrollment is state law, and our district follows the law and uses it as one tool to run our district in a financially responsible way. Our projected open enrollment percentage for this school year is approximately 27%. As a district, we want to be able to balance those opportunities for academic excellence, for class size, but at the same time, we want to remain a small school district. So when we talk about open enrollment, do know that our school district intends to stay at the size it is now, between 3,200, 3,300 students. Our board made the decision quite some time ago after doing a class size or a school right size study that the high school, in order to be able to offer both academic programming and that small school environment, that the ideal school size would be about 1,200 students. And so that is something we take seriously in Mahtomedi, that we want to both accept open enrolled students so that we can offer those academic opportunities for students, but at the same time stay a small school district. So we can't and we don't accept all open enrollment applications as a result. And when a student open enrolls in accordance with state law, the state aid does follow the student. And state aid, as we mentioned earlier, accounts for 73% of the revenue we receive in our general fund. So open enrolled students bring state per pupil funding as well as other funding sources, including categorical aid and federal funding. And so again, by accepting our open enrolled students, we're able to run our class sizes and classes and buildings efficiently, offer academic and extracurricular programming that we could not otherwise, and then we avoid deeper budget reductions as a result.
A question that we have been asked is, what's our current debt? So we currently have 48.7 in outstanding debt as of the end of the 17-18 fiscal year at June 30, 2018. So without going over the line item details of all of the debt you can see on the slide, Obviously, the bulk is in the 2014A general obligation refunding bonds for $38.5 million, which the bulk of that is the new Wildwood School that was approved by the taxpayers in the 2010 school building bond question. And then we also have an outstanding balance of $7.5 million related to the 2016A general obligation tax abatement bonds that provided the necessary funding to do many of our parking lot improvements and other infrastructure improvements related to the exterior of our grounds as well. So you can see the breakout of our outstanding debt. It should be noted that in our most recent ratings by Standard & Poor's, our debt rating was considered moderate, which is reasonable and expected given our size school district. And then finally, how and when to vote. So as we've been talking about the whole time, the election is on November 6th, 2018. Something that has really increased in popularity is voters can do early voting via absentee ballot, in person, or by mail. Ballots were available starting September 21st, so for the better part of a month here, or for a month, ballots have been available early voting via absentee. And Minnesota is what's considered a no excuses early voting via absentee ballot state. So taxpayers do not need a reason to vote early via absentee ballot. You don't need to be out of the state, out of the country. You can simply have a busy schedule that Tuesday night, November 6th. And if you feel that is the situation for you, you can either go and pick up a ballot at one of the service stations that you see on the screen there, or you can request to have one mailed to you by logging onto the Secretary of State's website. And then you see the Washington County elections line is available for you as well.
So if you have any future questions for us, feel free to email or give us a call. Our information is on the screen right here. We also have more information on our website, and there is a place where you can submit feedback, questions, or concerns also right from the website as you're looking through that information. So thank you for joining us, and I hope that we were able to provide you with the information that you needed to make a decision regarding the operating levy.
Thank you.